What a beautiful house. My mother will love it, we're moving in. My daughter-in-law said it so calmly that, for one strange second, I wondered whether I had somehow missed a conversation. She stood in the middle of my living room, turning slowly as she admired the tall windows, the stone fireplace, and the staircase my husband had built with his own hands. Then she smiled at me. Not nervously. Not apologetically. Confidently. As though she were announcing a decision that had already been approved. I set my teacup down. No, I said. Just one word. Her smile disappeared. My son looked at the floor. And that was when I realized something that would change the way I saw my family forever. They hadn't come to visit me. They had come to claim my house. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and for 37 years, the little white house on Willow Creek Road had been mine. Not my son's. Not my daughter-in-law's. Not her mother's. Mine. My husband, Robert, and I had bought it when we were 31. Back then, it wasn't the beautiful home everyone admired today. It was an old, neglected house with peeling paint, cracked windows, a leaking roof, and a backyard so overgrown that the previous owners had practically forgotten it existed. We didn't care. We saw possibilities. Robert saw a workshop. I saw a kitchen with sunlight pouring through the windows. Together, we saw a place where we could raise our children. And we did. Our son, Ethan, took his first steps across the worn wooden floor in the hallway. He learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway. He lost his first tooth sitting at the kitchen table. He brought home a terrible report card one summer and cried because he thought his father would be furious. Robert wasn't. He sat beside him and said, "A bad grade is a problem. Giving up is a choice." Ethan never forgot those words. Neither did I. Robert had been gone for 7 years when this story began. Cancer took him slowly. It took his strength first. Then his appetite. Then his ability to walk upstairs. But it never took his humor. Even during the worst months, he would look around the house and say, "Margaret, promise me you'll never let anybody convince you that this place isn't yours." I had laughed at him. Who would try? He had looked at me for a long moment. People who think love gives them ownership. I hadn't understood then. I did now. Because standing in my living room was my daughter-in-law, Claire. Beside her stood my son, Ethan. And behind them stood Claire's mother, Diane. Diane was smiling. Claire was already mentally rearranging my furniture. She pointed toward the hallway. That room would be perfect for Mom. Then toward the staircase. And Ethan and I could use the master bedroom. I stared at her. You could? She looked surprised by my tone. Well, yes. I glanced at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Did you two decide something? Claire laughed softly. Margaret, don't make this awkward. I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I said. I'm confused. She sighed. We're family. I waited. That means we should help one another. I agree. So there's no reason to be difficult. I looked around the room. My house isn't difficult. Claire's expression hardened. We've talked about this. No, I said. You have talked about this. She folded her arms. Fine. We've discussed it with Ethan. And neither of you thought to discuss it with me? Ethan finally spoke. Mom, we were going to. When? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Claire stepped in. We're not trying to take anything from you. Then what are you trying to do? She smiled. We're trying to make things easier. For whom? Again, silence. Diane finally cleared her throat. I hope you don't mind me saying this, Margaret, but you're alone here. I looked at her. Yes. You shouldn't have to be. I've been alone for 7 years. But you're getting older. I know my age. Claire walked toward the fireplace. We could all live together. It would be wonderful. I almost laughed. Wonderful for whom? For everyone. I looked at Ethan. He was still silent. That hurt more than Claire's words. Because Claire had always been outspoken. Ethan had always been different. He was my boy. My quiet one. The child who hated conflict. The man who would apologize when someone else stepped on his foot. I had spent his entire life teaching him to be kind. Somewhere along the way, he had confused kindness with surrender. I stood. Claire, you said you're moving in. Yes. I said no. Her face changed. You can't be serious. I am. But we've already made arrangements. I looked at Ethan. What arrangements? He swallowed. Claire gave notice on their apartment. My heart stopped for half a second. You did what? Claire answered. We gave the landlord notice last week. I stared at them. So you've already decided? We thought you'd understand. You gave away your home before asking whether you could move into mine? Claire's voice sharpened. It's not just your house. I slowly turned toward her. What did you say? She hesitated. Then repeated it. I said it's not just your house. Ethan is your only child. That doesn't make him a co-owner. He's your son. That doesn't make him a co-owner either. Diane stepped forward. Margaret, surely you're not going to put your own son out on the street. No. Claire smiled triumphantly. Good. I said no because he has a job and an income. The smile vanished. I am not putting my son out on the street, I continued. I'm refusing to let him move into my home without my permission. Ethan finally looked at me. Mom. I raised my hand. Not yet. He stopped. I looked at Claire. You need to cancel whatever plans you've made. Her cheeks flushed. You're really doing this? Yes. She picked up her purse. Fine. Then she turned toward Ethan. Tell her what you found. Ethan froze. I looked at him. What did you find? Claire smiled. And for the first time, I saw something behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. Confidence. She believed she had something. Something powerful enough to change my answer. Ethan pulled a folder from his bag. My stomach tightened. What is that? He placed it on the table. We had the property records reviewed. I didn't touch the folder. Why? Because Claire thought there might be a way to make this easier. I looked at Claire. She said quietly, your house is worth a lot more than you realize. So? So there are tax advantages if you transfer ownership before you die. I stared at her. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I suddenly understood. This wasn't about helping me. It was about getting my house. I see. Claire leaned closer. You could keep living here. Under what arrangement? Ethan would own it. While I'm alive? Yes. And what would I own? She shrugged. You'd still live here. That wasn't my question. She looked irritated. You'd have the right to remain. A tenant. Family. I looked at Ethan. He was pale. Did you agree to this? He whispered, I didn't know how to tell you. That answer broke something inside me. Not because he wanted the house. Because he had allowed someone else to make plans for my life. I picked up the folder. Inside were property documents, financial projections, and a letter from an attorney. At the bottom was a suggested transfer agreement. I read it carefully. Then I closed the folder. No. Claire's face went rigid. You haven't even considered it. I have. For 5 seconds? For 37 years. She stared at me. What does that mean? It means I've considered this house longer than you've been married to my son. Diane stood. This is becoming insulting. No, I said quietly. What is insulting is walking into someone's home and telling them where everyone is going to sleep. Nobody answered. I walked to the front door. You should leave. Claire stared at me. Mom. I looked at Ethan. You're welcome here. Then I looked at Claire. She is not. Ethan looked devastated. Claire looked furious. Diane looked offended. But they left. And when the door closed behind them, I stood alone in the entryway. My hands were shaking. I hated that. I hated feeling afraid in my own home. So I walked to Robert's old workshop. His tools were still hanging on the wall. His workbench still had the little burn mark from the time he accidentally dropped a soldering iron. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a photograph of us standing in front of the house the day we bought it. Robert had one arm around my shoulder. I was holding the keys. On the back he had written 3 words. Our beginning. I sat down. And I cried. Not because I regretted saying no. Because I finally understood why he had warned me. The next morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Susan Miller. She had handled Robert's estate years earlier. When I told her what happened, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked one question. Do you still have your original deed? Yes. Bring it. I spent the morning gathering every document I could find. The deed. The mortgage records. The property tax receipts. The renovation permits. The insurance documents. And the will Robert and I had signed. When Susan saw the folder, she smiled. You've kept excellent records. Robert had taught me that. People assume paperwork is boring, he used to say. Until they need it. Susan read everything. Then she looked at me. Margaret, this property is entirely yours. I know. No, I mean legally. There is no ambiguity. I breathed out. Good. She closed the file. Do you want to protect it? Yes. How far? I looked at her. What do you mean? Do you want your son to inherit this house eventually? I thought about Ethan as a little boy. His muddy shoes. His school projects. His first day of college. His wedding. His father holding back tears. Yes, I said. Susan nodded. Then we can structure it carefully. What if he marries again? She paused. He already is married. I know. What are you worried about? I looked through the office window. I don't want my house to become leverage. Susan understood immediately. We can create conditions. What kind? That the property remains yours during your lifetime. Afterward, it can pass into a trust for your son's benefit, but it won't automatically become community property or an asset that someone else can pressure him to transfer. I nodded. Do it. Susan smiled. Are you sure? Yes. Then she asked another question. Is your son in financial trouble? I hesitated. I don't know. Find out. That sentence stayed with me. Because it was the first thing that made me wonder whether Claire's sudden interest in my house had a deeper reason. 3 days later, I discovered it. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning the kitchen when Ethan called. Mom? His voice sounded strange. What happened? Can I come over? Of course. He arrived 20 minutes later. He looked exhausted. He sat at the kitchen table. I poured him coffee. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, Claire has debt. I waited. How much? He rubbed his face. A lot. How much is a lot? Almost $70,000. I stared at him. What kind of debt? Credit cards. Personal loans. Medical bills. Several accounts that had gone into collections. My heart sank. Does Diane know? Yes. Does she have debt too? He nodded. And you? Some. How much? About 12,000. I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? I was embarrassed. Ethan. He looked up. You're my son. You don't have to be embarrassed with me. His eyes filled with tears. I thought I could fix it. By moving into my house? He looked away. Claire thought selling your house eventually would solve everything. There it was. The truth. I sat back. Eventually? She said if we owned the house, we could refinance against it. I closed my eyes. So this wasn't about living together. No. It was about the equity. He whispered, yes. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Did you agree? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I signed nothing, he said quickly. But you considered it. Yes. Why? I was scared. Of what? Losing Claire. I looked at my son. He was 39 years old. A grown man. And somehow he was still afraid that saying no would make someone leave him. I reached across the table. Ethan, listen to me. He looked up. Anyone who requires you to betray your own mother to prove your love isn't asking for love. His chin trembled. I know. Do you? He nodded. Then he whispered something that surprised me. Claire knows about the trust. I froze. What trust? The one Susan is preparing. How? I don't know. I stared at him. Then my phone rang. Susan. I answered. Margaret, we need to talk. About what? There was an inquiry about your property. From whom? She hesitated. An attorney representing your daughter-in-law. My blood went cold. Why? She requested copies of your estate documents. She has no right. I didn't give her anything. I stood. Thank you. After the call ended, Ethan looked at me. What happened? I told him. He closed his eyes. She won't stop. No, I said. I'll make her stop. I looked at him. How? I don't know yet. That night, I changed the locks. I also installed cameras. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted proof. The next week, Claire didn't call. She didn't visit. She didn't apologize. Instead, I received a certified letter. It claimed that Ethan had contributed financially to renovations on the property over the years and therefore had an equitable interest in the home. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Ethan had contributed exactly $0 to major renovations. He had once helped me paint the guest room. He was 14. I called Susan. She told me not to respond. We'll handle it. The following morning, she sent a formal notice to Claire's attorney. It was short. Very short. It explained the ownership history, enclosed documentation, and made one point absolutely clear. I was the sole owner. The claim disappeared. But Claire didn't. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my house. I was watering roses when she walked through the gate. I want to talk. You can talk from there. She looked offended. I've changed. I hope so. I realize I handled things badly. That's a start. She stepped closer. I'm under a lot of pressure. I know. You don't understand what it's like. No, I said. I don't. Her eyes filled with tears. Please. I lowered the hose. What do you want? I need help. There it was. Not an apology. A request. How much? She looked embarrassed. 20,000. I stared at her. For what? To settle some debt. No. Her face fell. Margaret. I will help Ethan and the children if they are in genuine trouble. I will not hand you $20,000 to erase debts you created while trying to take my house. Her eyes hardened. You really think you're better than me? No. You're punishing me. No. You're enjoying this. I looked at her. I am not enjoying seeing my family fall apart. She turned away. Then she said quietly, Ethan will choose me. I didn't respond. She looked back. You know that, right? I nodded. I hope he chooses a life where he can respect himself. She left. 3 days later, Ethan moved out. Not from his apartment. From Claire's house. He rented a small place across town. He called me from the parking lot. I did it. What did you do? I left. I closed my eyes. Are you safe? Yes. Do you need anything? No. He paused. Mom? Yes? Thank you for not rescuing me. I smiled through tears. You finally rescued yourself. For the next few months, things were quiet. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. One Friday afternoon, I received a call from the school my grandchildren attended. The secretary told me that there was a problem with their emergency contact information. I wasn't listed anymore. Claire had removed me. I felt something inside me go still. It wasn't about control. It wasn't even about being offended. It was about the children. They had always been close to me. Every Saturday, they came over. We baked. We watched old movies. We planted vegetables. I had taught Lily how to make pancakes. I had taught Noah how to repair a bicycle chain. And suddenly, because I had refused to surrender my house, I was being erased from their lives. I called Ethan. He didn't answer. Then I called again. Nothing. That evening, he came to my house. His eyes were red. She won't let me bring them. I opened the door wider. Come inside. He did. She says you're turning me against her. I haven't said anything to you. I know. She says you're choosing your mother over your family. I looked at him. You are her family too. I know. He sat down. I don't know what to do. I sat beside him. You can't control what Claire does. What can I control? Your choices. He looked at me. You can stop participating in the fight. How? By refusing to argue about my house. He nodded. And by documenting everything concerning the children. He looked surprised. Why? Because someday they may ask you why they weren't allowed to see their grandmother. He stared at the floor. I never thought about that. Think about it now. He did. And for the first time, my son began standing up for himself. He consulted an attorney. He documented missed visits. He requested a formal parenting arrangement. He stopped sending money directly to Claire for expenses he couldn't verify. And slowly, his life began to stabilize. Meanwhile, Claire became more desperate. She tried another approach. She sent Diane. Diane arrived one afternoon carrying a pie. I almost smiled. That's a dangerous weapon. She didn't laugh. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She placed the pie on the counter. I owe you an apology. I looked at her. For what? For assuming I deserved your house. That surprised me. She sat down. I didn't understand what Claire was doing. Do you now? Yes. She looked ashamed. She told me you had promised. I never did. I know. She stared at her hands. She told me you were going to leave the house to Ethan. I probably will. She said you were preventing us from having security. I shook my head. Security cannot be built on someone else's fear. Diane nodded. I know that now. Then she said something I didn't expect. Claire has been lying to me too. I looked at her. How? She told me Ethan was going to inherit immediately. He isn't. I know. She told me you were trying to keep the family divided. I never did. Diane sighed. I think my daughter has convinced herself that if she owns enough things, she will finally feel safe. I didn't answer. Because maybe that was true. But understanding someone's fear doesn't excuse what they do with it. Diane stood. I'm sorry. I nodded. Thank you. She picked up her purse. Then she turned. Margaret? Yes? Do you still want Ethan to inherit the house? I smiled sadly. Yes. Even after everything? Yes. Why? I looked around the kitchen. Because I don't want Claire's choices to determine how I feel about my son. Diane's eyes filled with tears. I wish I had understood that sooner. She left. A week later, something happened that changed everything. Susan called. Margaret, you need to come to my office. Why? I can't discuss it over the phone. I went immediately. She placed a document on the desk. This was filed against your property. I read it. My heart started pounding. It was an attempt to place a lien against my home. Based on a claim that Ethan owed money to a private lender. I looked at Susan. What does Ethan have to do with this? The lender believes your son has an interest in the property. But he doesn't. I know. Then how? Susan slid another document toward me. A loan application. My name appeared on it. My signature appeared beneath it. I stared. That isn't my signature. I know. My hands began shaking. Someone had forged my signature. And they had tried to use my home as collateral. Susan leaned forward. Margaret, this is serious. Who submitted it? She looked at me. The application came through a company connected to your daughter-in-law's brother. My stomach dropped. I had met Claire's brother, Jason, only twice. He worked in finance. He had always been polite. Too polite. I sat back. What do I do? First, we report the fraud. And then? Then we protect everything. I signed affidavits. The police became involved. The lender froze the application. The forged documents were preserved. And suddenly the situation was no longer a family disagreement. It was fraud. Ethan was devastated when I told him. Mom, I swear I didn't know. I believe you. I didn't know Jason was involved. Do you think Claire knew? He closed his eyes. I don't know. That was the hardest answer. Because I knew. I knew she had wanted the house. I knew she had contacted lawyers. I knew she had tried to pressure Ethan. But I didn't know whether she had crossed that final line. Until the police found the messages. There were dozens. Messages between Claire and Jason. Messages discussing the property. Messages about the loan. Messages about how much equity the house contained. And one message stopped me cold. Claire had written. Once the paperwork goes through, she won't have a choice. I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone down. Ethan was sitting across from me. He looked broken. Mom. I couldn't speak. He whispered, I'm sorry. I finally looked at him. This isn't your fault. But she's my wife. Not anymore. He looked down. I know. The legal process took months. During that time, Claire stopped coming to my house. She stopped contacting me. She stopped calling Ethan. Her lawyer eventually informed us that she was willing to cooperate. But cooperation wasn't forgiveness. There had to be consequences. The forged application was withdrawn. The lien was never placed. The investigation continued. Jason faced legal consequences for submitting fraudulent documents. Claire's role was reviewed. She wasn't charged with forging the signature herself because the evidence did not establish that she physically created it. But the messages showed that she knew about the plan. And that knowledge changed everything. Ethan filed for divorce. It was painful. Even when a marriage is broken, ending it still hurts. I watched my son grieve. Not only the woman he had married. The future he had imagined. The family dinners. The vacations. The house they would someday buy. The children growing up with both parents under one roof. He mourned all of it. I told him something Robert had once told me. You don't grieve because leaving was wrong. You grieve because you hoped staying would eventually become right. Months passed. Ethan rebuilt his life. He found a better job. Paid down his debt. Opened a savings account. And most importantly, he learned to say no. To everyone. Including me. One afternoon, he came to my house with the children. Lily ran through the door. Grandma. I hugged her tightly. Noah followed. Grandma, Dad says we're going to plant tomatoes. I smiled. Then we'd better get started. Ethan stood in the doorway. He looked different. Lighter. Mom? Yes? I need to tell you something. What? I don't want your house. I laughed. That's unfortunate. I was planning to give you the whole thing tomorrow. He smiled. Then his face became serious. I mean it. I know. I don't want to inherit it because I'm your son. I looked at him. I want you to inherit it because I love you. He swallowed. But if I ever get this house, I want it to be because I protected it when you needed me to. My eyes filled with tears. That is exactly why you deserve it. He nodded. Then Lily shouted from the backyard. Grandma! The tomatoes! We both laughed. For the first time in years, the house sounded like itself again. Children running. A screen door opening. Someone laughing in the kitchen. Life. Real life. Not ownership. Not money. Not property. Life. A year later, the divorce was finalized. Claire moved to another state. Diane stayed in touch with me. Unexpectedly, we became friends. She would visit once every few months. We'd drink tea. talk about gardening, and sometimes laugh about how absurd everything had become. Ethan remained single. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry. He was simply careful. One Sunday morning, he sat with me on the back porch. The maple tree Robert and I had planted was turning red. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Do you ever wish you had just let us move in?" I smiled. "No." "Not even once?" "No." He looked at the tree. "I used to think saying no meant you didn't love people. And now?" "Now I think sometimes saying no is the only way to protect love from becoming resentment." I smiled. "That sounds like something your father would have said." Ethan laughed. "Dad would have been furious." "At Claire?" "At me." I looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I almost let someone take your home." I shook my head. "Your father would have hugged you." "You think so?" "I know so." He was quiet. Then he asked, "Did he ever tell you why he was so protective of this house?" I looked toward the fireplace and sighed. "Because he knew what it cost us." Ethan nodded. "I remember." "You were too young." "No." He smiled. "I remember more than you think." He told me that when he was 8, he once asked Robert why we didn't move to a bigger house. Robert had answered, "Because a bigger house isn't necessarily a better home." Ethan laughed. "I didn't understand that." "You do now." "Yes." We sat in silence. Then Ethan said, "I want to buy my own house." I smiled. "You should. Not too big." "Good. Something with a small yard." "Better. And a kitchen where I can make breakfast with the kids." I looked at him. "That sounds like a home." He nodded. "That's what I want. Not my house. His own. His own beginning." And that was the greatest revenge of all. Not watching Claire lose. Not seeing Jason face consequences. Not keeping the property. It was watching my son finally become the man I had raised him to be. Someone who understood that love was not possession. That family was not entitlement. That kindness did not mean surrender. And that a boundary was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of self-respect. 2 years later, I changed my will again. The house would still go to Ethan. But I added one condition. It could never be used as collateral for another person's debt without the approval of an independent trustee. I told Ethan. He nodded. "I agree." Then I handed him the keys to the house. He stared at them. "What are these?" "Your keys." "Mom, I don't want them yet." "I know." "Then why give them to me?" "Because someday this will be yours." He closed his fingers around them. "Someday." "Yes." "When you're gone." I smiled. "Exactly." He hugged me. And I whispered into his ear, "Not a minute sooner." He laughed. "I promise." That evening, I walked through every room. The dining room where Robert and I had celebrated our 25th anniversary. The hallway where Ethan had taken his first steps. The kitchen where I had made thousands of meals. The guest room where my grandchildren had slept during thunderstorms. Robert's workshop. His chair. His books. His old coffee mug. I stood in the center of the living room. For a moment, I could almost hear him. "Margaret?" "Yes?" "You kept it." I smiled. "Yes, Robert. I told you not to let anyone take it." "I didn't." I looked out the window. The maple tree moved gently in the evening wind. I understood something then. A home isn't valuable because of its square footage. It isn't valuable because of its market price. It isn't valuable because someone else wants it. A home becomes valuable because of everything that happens inside it. Every birthday. Every argument. Every forgiveness. Every morning coffee. Every child's laughter. Every goodbye. Every return. And sometimes, protecting a home means protecting the person who built a life inside it. My daughter-in-law once walked through my front door and calmly announced that she was moving in. She expected me to argue. She expected guilt. She expected pressure to work. She expected me to choose family over myself. But she misunderstood something. I never had to choose between my family and my dignity. Because real family doesn't ask you to surrender one for the other. My son eventually understood that. My grandchildren grew up knowing they could always knock on my door. Diane learned the truth. Claire lost the control she thought she had. And I kept the house. But more importantly, I kept my peace. I still drink coffee at the same kitchen table every morning. I still sit beside Robert's favorite window when it rains. I still talk to him sometimes when the house is quiet. And every once in a while, Ethan brings the children over. They run through the hallway. They argue over board games. They leave toys in places where toys absolutely do not belong. And I love every second of it. Because now when they come through my door, I know they aren't coming because they believe they own a piece of this house. They're coming because they know they are loved here. That is the difference. The house was never the prize. The house was the boundary. And once I protected that boundary, I finally discovered who truly belonged on the other side of it. My son. My grandchildren. The people who loved me without asking what they could get from me. And me. Still standing. Still living. Still holding the keys. Still home.